I never thought my quiet suburban life would turn into the setting of an all-out war between an overzealous HOA president and a gang of bikers, but that's exactly what happened when Karen decided to host a wedding in my backyard without my permission. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. It was a quiet Sunday morning, and I was enjoying my coffee on the porch when I noticed some unfamiliar faces walking around my yard. At first, I thought maybe they were just lost or looking for someone. But then, I saw the decorations. Ribbons, chairs, tables, there was even a giant white arch being set up right in front of my favorite oak tree. I stormed out to confront them. "Excuse me. What do you think you're doing?" A woman, dressed in what could only be described as the unofficial uniform of an HOA tyrant, a pastel sweater draped over her shoulders, pearls around her neck, and an expression that screamed entitlement, turned to me with a smug smile. "Oh, good morning," she said cheerfully, as if she hadn't just invaded my personal space. "I was wondering when you'd come out to say hello." I blinked. "Say hello? Lady, you're setting up an event in my backyard." She laughed, waving a perfectly manicured hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just a little wedding. My niece is getting married, and we needed a lovely outdoor setting. Your yard is simply perfect." I was stunned. Absolutely stunned. "And you thought you could just use it without asking me?" She sighed as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Look, we were going to tell you. But we figured since you never really use your yard for anything important, it wouldn't be a big deal. The whole neighborhood is coming. You wouldn't want to be the reason for ruining someone's special day, would you?" I folded my arms. "Actually, I think I would. Because this is my property, and you are trespassing." Her expression soured, and the pleasant mask she had been wearing cracked just a little. "Well, technically, it's part of the HOA, and as president, I have certain privileges." That's when I realized she actually believed what she was saying. I had dealt with pushy HOA members before, but this was next level. I shook my head. "No. Absolutely not. Pack it up and get out." Karen's eyes narrowed, and she crossed her arms. "Well, that's a shame. You see, we've already sent out the invitations, and canceling now would be terribly inconvenient. Besides, the wedding is in just a few hours. It's a little late to back out now." I was fuming. Back out? I was never in. "Get your stuff and get out of my yard." She let out a dramatic sigh and turned to the group of people setting up. "Continue as planned, everyone. Don't mind the grumpy neighbor." Oh, it was on. I pulled out my phone and dialed the non-emergency police line. While I waited for them to answer, Karen smirked at me. "Calling the police? Really? How childish." "I'm reporting trespassing," I said flatly. Karen just laughed. "Go ahead. By the time they get here, the ceremony will already be starting. And do you really think they'll ruin a beautiful wedding over something so trivial?" I wasn't so sure. I had heard stories about the local police brushing off HOA disputes, and Karen seemed far too confident. I needed a backup plan. That's when inspiration struck. I ended the call before it connected and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. It rang twice before a deep, gravelly voice answered. "Yeah?" "Hey, Bear," I said, a slow grin spreading across my face. "How do you feel about a wedding?" Bear was the leader of the local biker club, the Iron Fangs. I had done some work on his house a while back, and we had struck up an unlikely friendship. He owed me a favor, and I was about to cash in. Bear chuckled. "Depends. Am I crashing it?" "Yep," I said. "And it's in my backyard." There was a brief pause. Then he laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that promised trouble. "Oh, this I gotta see. We'll be there in 10. I hung up and turned back to Karen, who was busy ordering people around like a deranged wedding planner. "You've got about 10 minutes before my guests arrive," I said. She barely looked at me. "Guests? I thought you didn't approve of this wedding." I smiled. Oh, I don't. But you're going to love them. Exactly 10 minutes later, the distant sound of revving engines filled the air. Karen frowned, looking around. What is that noise? Then they appeared. A line of motorcycles roaring down the street, pulling up right in front of my house. The riders were exactly what you'd expect: leather jackets, tattoos, beards, and a general aura of "don't mess with us." Bear was the first to hop off his bike, strolling up to me with a grin. "Nice day for a party," he said, loudly enough for Karen to hear. Her face had turned ghost white. Who are these people?" I crossed my arms. "Oh, just some friends of mine. Thought I'd invite them since you decided to use my yard for your little event." Bear turned to Karen, his grin widening. "Hey there, ma'am. I hear there's a wedding happening. Hope you don't mind if we stick around. We love a good celebration." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. This is not, they can't be here." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Why not? I thought the whole neighborhood was invited." She sputtered, glaring at me. "This is outrageous." Bear just laughed, slinging an arm around my shoulder. "Well, we'll just get comfortable then." And just like that, the entire atmosphere changed. The wedding guests, who had been happily setting up, were now frozen in place, staring at the unexpected additions to the party. Karen looked like she was about to explode. "You ruined my niece's wedding," she shrieked. I shrugged. "You shouldn't have used my yard without permission." She turned on her heel and stomped off, her phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling the police on me. Meanwhile, Bear and the rest of the bikers made themselves comfortable. Some sat on the lawn chairs meant for the wedding guests. Others grabbed sodas from the refreshment table. One particularly bold guy started sampling the wedding cake. By the time the police did show up, the wedding was in complete chaos. Karen was screaming about trespassers, but when the officers saw that it was actually her who had invaded my property, they weren't too sympathetic. Long story short, the wedding was shut down. Karen left fuming, and my new biker friends stuck around for an impromptu backyard barbecue. As the days passed, word of the wedding incident spread throughout the neighborhood. Some people laughed, others were shocked, and a few even came by to give me a quiet thumbs up. Apparently, Karen's reign of terror had been getting on everyone's nerves, and my little stunt had given them a rare moment of satisfaction. One evening, as I was watering my front lawn, my neighbor Greg walked over, grinning. "I heard what you did," he said, crossing his arms. "Karen's been complaining to everyone, but I think most of us agree it was about time someone put her in her place." I chuckled. "Well, I just thought it was only fair. If she wanted to use my property without asking, I figured I'd return the favor." Greg nodded approvingly. "You know, a lot of us have been thinking about starting a petition to get her removed from the HOA board. The problem is, she's got a small group of die-hard supporters who think she's keeping the neighborhood proper." I sighed. "Yeah, I can see that. But maybe, just maybe, this incident will make her think twice before pulling something like this again." Greg smirked. "One can only hope. But hey, if you ever need help with another Karen situation, count me in." A week later, I found a formal notice taped to my front door. It was from the HOA, and my stomach sank as I read the words. "Due to multiple complaints, your recent gathering has been deemed a violation of HOA regulations regarding excessive noise and unauthorized use of residential space for events. You are hereby fined $500. Failure to comply may result in further penalties." I groaned, knowing exactly who was behind this. Karen wasn't going to let this go without trying to make me pay, literally. Instead of fuming, I decided to play it smart. I did some research, dug into the HOA's bylaws, and found something interesting. Nowhere did it say that gatherings of friends, so long as they weren't selling anything or disturbing the peace past certain hours, were against the rules. And as for the unauthorized use of residential space, well, my driveway was my property, not theirs. Armed with this knowledge, I drafted a response and sent it to the HOA board. I politely pointed out that I had broken no actual rules and that any fines imposed on me would be an overreach of their authority. A few days later, I got a reply. The fine was rescinded, much to my relief. But I knew Karen wouldn't take this defeat gracefully. Sure enough, the next week, she was back, clipboard in hand, inspecting every inch of my property. I watched from my porch as she scribbled furiously. Finally, she marched up to me, triumphant. "Your lawn ornaments," she said, jabbing a finger at the small gnome I'd put back on my porch. "Still against regulations. You'll need to remove them immediately." I sighed. "Karen, you know what? I'll make you a deal. If you can show me exactly where in the HOA rules it says I can't have a garden gnome, I'll take it down." Her lips thinned. "It's an unspoken rule. We have standards in this neighborhood." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Well, I don't recall signing anything about unspoken rules." She huffed. "Fine. I'll be bringing this up at the next HOA meeting." I smiled. Looking forward to it. The HOA meeting was packed. Karen had clearly rallied her supporters, but to my surprise, a lot of neighbors who usually kept quiet had shown up too. Karen stood at the front of the room, addressing the board. "We cannot allow homeowners to make a mockery of our community. First, it was the biker gang incident. Now, we have blatant disregard for the aesthetic integrity of our neighborhood. If we don't enforce the rules, this place will become a circus." Murmurs spread through the room. Then Greg stood up. "Karen, I've got a question. How come you get to decide what's acceptable? We're all supposed to have a say, right? Because I sure don't remember voting on whether garden gnomes were a problem." Others nodded in agreement. Karen looked flustered. I am simply ensuring we maintain proper decorum." Another neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Thompson, spoke up. "I've lived here for 30 years. We never had these kinds of petty rules until you took over. Maybe it's time we rethink the way this HOA is run." The murmurs grew louder. Someone suggested a vote of no confidence in Karen's leadership. I sat back, watching the tables turn. In the end, the board agreed to hold a vote on whether Karen should remain HOA president. The meeting ended in chaos, with Karen storming out, her face red with fury. A week later, I got a knock on my door. It was Greg, grinning ear to ear. "Guess what? The vote passed. Karen's been removed from the HOA board." I laughed. "No way. Way. She threw a fit, of course, but she's out. No more Karen bossing us around." I leaned against my doorframe, taking it all in. Well, I guess that means I can finally put up my Christmas decorations in peace. Greg chuckled. "You and me both." As he walked away, I glanced over at Karen's house. Her blinds were shut tight, and her once pristine yard was starting to look a little unkempt. Maybe, just maybe, she was learning what it felt like to be on the receiving end for once. And as for me? Well, let's just say my next backyard barbecue was going to be bigger than ever.